Welcome, Mahmudul Hassan, to Caleido podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
You fought your way from the slums of Bangladesh to a startup founder whose company is selling AI-first cloud-based medical software in 20 countries. Tell me about your story.
Yes, I was born in Bangladesh. So I was born to a parent that comes from very humble background. My father was the first in their family to go to a diploma engineering course, which is after post high school diploma. And my mother barely passed her high school diploma. So my father is a mechanical and electrical engineer, worked as a second level service engineer for the military. And my mother was a housewife. And I grown up basically in the cities to cities because my father used to be transferred every 3 years to different military cantonments. So I mostly went to the military-run school, and that's my initial childhood. So I have traveled quite a lot in my childhood to different parts of Bangladesh. So as my father was not a very high-ranking government official, so income was very limited. And when my late teenage years, he was transferred to a city which was quite far from the capital where we are living. And that time we didn't have that much money. So, my father was able to buy a plot of land, which my grandfather has bought for his help to buy him. And there he just said that I don't have any money to send you guys to what do you call Skerrostalo in Finnish?
Residential building.
Residential building. So in that plot of land where it had a slum, and then we ended up being there. So that's how we ended up in a.
What was life there?
So my mother was taking care of us. We are like 4 siblings. So he was away, of course, he was probably coming every few months for a week or something. So I remember thinking basically that how did we ended up here? Then it was a very heavy reaction in terms of finding poverty or the situation, or you are suddenly in a position there where you don't have any control. So it had a huge impact mentally for me, at least, to build my resilience, to fight for that fighting spirit. I think that's where the initial building block that happened in there.
What kind of hardship did you have?
It was not like we didn't have food to eat. Of course, food is cheap in Bangladesh, so that's contrary to any other things. You go to a street, you see that the hawkers are selling fresh fruits and vegetables and things like that. So it was more sort of a socio-economic status in terms of looking at living in a better living condition in terms of having a basics do you have a telephone at your home or a car or so just socio-economic wise it was difficult because on that level it is kind of it's a hierarchical sort of society in a sense that you kind of have to have certain socio-economic status, which is probably quite difficult concept in Finland, I have to say, because the general income level kind of makes sure that everybody has a good home to sleep and a good transportation system and things like that. So it's quite contrary in Bangladesh.
How's your education then advanced?
So there I was studying my high school diploma to the Lukio in the military supported schools. And from there on, because of this trauma, I believe I did not do really well in my high school diploma. That means I did not qualify enough credit to apply for the top engineering school in Bangladesh. And that sort of, I sort of saw that there's a dark future for me. I wanted to become a software engineer or work with computer since I was very young. And then when I did not qualify to be able to apply to my dream engineering school. I said that, what choices do I have? That's where I was determined to get my education outside of Bangladesh, and inspired by stories like you can, work, earn a living, and at the same time pay for your tuition. And that's sort of what inspired me to come abroad and get education in computer.
So what happened then?
Then I applied to two universities in Canada, Alberta and Concordia, and both did accepted me. But when I applied for the visa, then the visa officer said that you're too poor to go to Canada. So because you need to show certain economic activities of banks and like how you're going to support. So I had to withdraw the application from Canada. Then at the same time, I think I applied to Australia as well. At that time, it was 9/11, 2001. The whole visa situation was like, very slow process. And so that's where I think I also got declined by the Australian visa. And a few months later, for some reason, United Kingdom, because of their new Labour government, opened this open immigration policy, and then they opened their border for the students, and that's and then I went for a visa application. I remember the visa officer was asking me, kind of, what do you want? Where do you want to go to UK? It's like, I really want to study computer science, and I want to be an engineer. And they said, and he was a very humorous guy, and has asked me like, okay, can you tell me what is RAM means? I think he was just knew some basics about computer, and he was asking me question. I was like, yeah, it's random access memory. And then he was very impressed with my spontaneous response. And I said that, hey, young man, I'm very impressed with you. So I'm going to give you a visa. You don't have to wait. Here you go. Good luck. So then I got my exit. What do you call that? The Willy Wonka golden ticket, right?
What is REM?
RAM.
RAM, random access memory. And then this stamp. That's it. You're qualified.
That's my Willy Wonka golden ticket, right? I remember I called my mom and she was crying. So yeah, that was the first time it felt like that I came out of this rut, and then I won something. I proved something. I proved something that I can be persistent and win. So yeah, that was one of the happiest day of my life.
What happened next?
So next, of course, with the big dream, I moved to UK and started the struggle. And the struggles were not, it's very different in culture, I would say, because in Bangladesh, we are from a conservative family. So there we went to UK. There was like almost 29 other Bangladeshi young guys. We moved into this town, and then we are all like young guys starting our like education career in there. And first time ever, we sort of felt a non-conservative freedom of life. So then, what it means basically, going to the nightclubs, partying, drinking, learning to drink, the whole thing, which was a forbidden thing in our culture. So that was a shock, and also exhilarating, and all kind of things. So you're kind of suddenly being from a eggshell to you open up, and so that kind of a fast education to the Western system, right? Many of my peers actually did not survive that because of did not survive, meaning that if our mission was to come and study and build a career, most of them actually did not have nothing. I mean, many of them did not finish their school, and some of them went back to Bangladesh, and some of them never finished, and all sort of things. So only few of my close friends, we made it through, meaning having a degree and a career post that.
Did you move on your own to UK, or was it your family members joining you? Or
so it was only myself, and that time we had few relatively unknown friends, which we gathered together when we are coming to UK. So it was, our friends were basically our family. So there was no immediate family member to look, and there was no guardian. So also you can imagine that it's like you're completely on your own, coming from a conservative family where you're protected by your family, and it's now you're on your own. You have to make your life. And that's why a lot of our peers actually fail to keep themselves sane or in the right track of path, and kind of got lost. And there's one of my friends, he was very, very talented. I mean, I've never seen someone who's so sharp in memory understanding. And he completely went to the opposite direction of the, drugs and stuff like that. And then so that was like a full potential talent just completely got wasted because not having that system of control.
how did you manage financially in UK? So were you supported by your family, or did you work? Or
So bless my dad, he had to break his retirement fund to fund my at least half of my tuition fees for that, and the other half I always had two jobs, work like nights and days and in between. And so I had to find the money, half of the money myself, and half was supported by my dad's pension fund.
yeah, how old were you when you moved to UK?
19. I think, yeah, 19 or just about to be 20, something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how's your journey continued from there?
On the first few years, I was very good at the studies, and the first year I had like straight 7 A's and a B out of the 8 subject. And then the second year was also similar. Then on the third year, I got the Western virus, meaning my peers were able to convince me to join them with the parties, and that was really, really crazy, because we would like
Were
say,
there
hey,
good parties? Were there good parties?
there were good parties, I have to say. There were good parties. So we would do crazy things like, okay, hey, let's go to Cambridge to, Cambridge is a nightclub, and that's awesome, amazing, and then what we do, like, 8 or 10 of us in 2 or 3 cars, we would drive there, party whole night, and come back drunk. So
Yeah.
So crazy things like that, as you can imagine, those like,
Yeah. How about after that? So how things develop?
So yeah, after that, on the third year, I realized that I need to really, my mission is to finish my study, and I cannot go about like this, because my second year, the second semester in the second year, I started to really suffer because of all the partying and stuff like that. So by the way, in UK, the university degrees are 3 years, not 4 years. So then on the third year, I sobered up because I had to finish my education, because I had a family pressure, and I was the eldest son and responsibility and all sort of stuff. So I had to sober up and then just go finish my study. Then I finished my study and then moved to Scotland to take a job in British Telecom. And thereon, slowly, I started my career as a software engineer, which was very difficult to do. If you know United Kingdom, they call this Russell group of, or is it not Russell, like there's a top 20 universities. If you are part of those, if you're a student of those top 20 university, you do not struggle to get a job. But if you're not those top 20, then finding a job is extremely difficult. So that's why I had to move to Scotland to get a entry-level job in IT, and then I then moved back and then trained myself to be an engineer, software engineer, and then I had my first official job as a software engineer after like 2 years I graduated.
So you got your first ID job 2 years after graduating.
Yes, like a software engineer job. Yes. Before that, I was
Yeah.
doing IT support, telephone support.
Okay.
And things
But
like that.
still in the IT, but yes,
In the
studying
IT, yes,
software.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what happened next then?
That company, I got really inspired to become like a software engineer, and the company had a great perks to go to do a continuous studies. And then I found a master's course in Oxford, which I enrolled and started. And when I went to Oxford to study software engineering, then I really came to know real talent of people. So there's a saying like, you are the average of your five people that you know. That's when I realized that my average was pretty low. And then I found out that basically the world is much bigger and interesting place. I had a friend there. He said that, hey, what do you do? Like, hey, I work for this big banking corporation, and my job is to tune the performance, the data connection performance between the trading desks. So basically, I would optimize the Sao Paulo trading desk with Los Angeles or Tokyo. And my job is just to optimize the connection, because every millisecond counts for a trade execution. And that's the first time I was like, wow, I typically know that you can be a software engineer, right? But you can be an engineer just optimizing such a performance level to, so that just opened my world, right? So I didn't know all this so that was a great inspiration, and also to get to see the world in a different perspective. And also that why it started my inspiration to be an entrepreneur as well. So that's my entrepreneurial spirit, like woke up during my time in Oxford.
And what happened next?
So after that, I was starting different projects and ideas, and try to build a team and project ideas. And initially, when that time the iPad was launched, or the tablet, then one of the idea was to build an EPOS system with the iPad. And then guess what? Stripe, right? So similar time, maybe would have been persistent, or if I was in Silicon Valley, I could have started Stripe. But anyway, so that started, and there was a lot of learning looking back. So we wanted to target the restaurant business for EPOS systems. And then it turns out that basically in UK, the restaurant business, they prefer cash and not a system anyway. Anyway, that was the wrong segment of the customer, but it was the right idea. Wrong segment of customer profile. So anyway, I continued the whole idea, and so then I moved to Finland.
How did you met your wife to be?
So yeah, she was she was visiting her friend who is
Was it a party
from Finland.
Was it a party?
That was almost a party, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So then her friend used to study there, and she came to visit her friend who is from Finland. Then we met through a mutual friend, and then we continued dating, and then ended up being together for a long time, and kids. And when we have our first daughter, then we decided to move to Finland to give our kids the best chance in education. In the hindsight, I was reluctant to move here, but on the hindsight, that was the best decision.
What image did you have about Finland before visiting here?
To be honest, not much at all. All I knew that it was next to Russia and Stockholm. And some sense the Finland is not selling itself like the Swedes do. What do I mean by that? Like if you go to Bangladesh and ask an average guy, like describe Sweden, then they will just like, oh, it's ABBA, it's yellow, and it's chocolate or something. And there are some activities from there, like on an embassy level. But then for Finland, there is no embassy in Finland. And Bangladesh is the largest exporter of ready-made garments. And if you go to H&M, or all the clothes are from Bangladesh basically. So then I could never figure out basically why there was no kind of a on that diplomatic kind of relationship. So that in some sense, these Swedes do a much more better branding than the Finns. That's what was my point.
Before you started with your co-founders MVision, what happened before that?
So when I moved to Finland, my entrepreneurial beast woke up even more. I think it's the darkness. It's probably the reason. And so first year I was very much struggling, and then I asked advice from my father-in-law, like, hey, this is so difficult, it's dark, what shall I do? So he gave me a piece of advice, like, when the darkness comes, you have to have activities, then you are kind of immerse yourself, you just fully immerse yourself on that. And then I was thinking that actually it's the entrepreneurship and the startup. And I don't know if you remember 2013, that time there was startup sauna, there was events like every week about this, and in the meetup groups were like full of different IoT and things like that. So I started to attend a lot of these events, started to understand the whole startup ecosystems, and then I uncovered that there's pretty much a systems developed in Finland about startup. Then I thought that this is the time to do something about it. And I was getting dissatisfied in my job with this large radiotherapy vendor who has a large engineering center here. And it's not like I was dissatisfied with the mission of the company, but it was just the corporate stuff, like, this is your silo, you do this, no discussion about innovation, or sometimes I started to ask like the fundamental questions. For example, like, if we do this, how the patient benefits? Why are we not accelerating adoption to the cloud? Okay, what is the AI strategy? This kind of AI deep learning going to transform everything. What is that? So internally, I just kind of like, hey, you're just an engineer, do your job, and we give you a free lunch benefit, eat your lunch. And then I thought that was just too one-dimensional. Then I thought like, okay, the startup world is going crazy in Finland, and there is this problem needs to be solved. Then I started to look for co-founders, and then I was kind of thinking what could be an ideal team. And then I approached my co-founder, medical physicist, and the AI engineer. So it's like a domain expert, AI, and never thought about the sales or business. I was like, it will probably come, or I have to do it. And so I learned to build a co-founding team, then learned to do sales, which I'm not a sales guy, but I can sell the vision. So that's what I learned when we started to build MVision.
So working in this medical hardware manufacturers, you identified some kind of a problem.
Yes.
And that was basis of the startup idea. Tell me about it.
This is a very profound learning or insight because I have been thinking about, like, because before that I tried like 5 attempts to build a team or develop an idea. Then you have an idea, but you don't have a team. Then you have a team, you don't have an idea. What happened was, like, when I was working for this radiotherapy vendor, I was sent for a training to how does the whole treatment planning works in radiation oncology. I ended up training with 30 other oncologists, medical physicists, and the dosimetrists who are also going through a learning process. So there I identified this problem of this computer vision problem that in radiotherapy, when you treat a patient, you place the patient in a machine. The machine do not understand the geometry of the patient, because the geometry you have to create through some 3D CAD software. And the reference to that is some form of a CT scan, but then you're kind of seeing the CT scan, drawing it like a Photoshop, creating the 3D volume, generate the volume, and then show the machine, and the machine then sees the 3D volume. Then I thought, like, this is definitely an interesting computer vision problem. It's 2016, 2017, the whole ImageNet, the whole UNet going crazy. It's like, hey, this is the problem to be solved. Then I approached my one of my colleagues, and we were working at the same company. And I never forget his eyes just suddenly glowed, like, hey, you pitched me like 10 different ideas. This is all shit, if I can. But this kind of like, I almost see that it's kind of like a idea and a team. So I had a team in mind. And then when I fed the right idea, there was like a, wow, this is like almost like a spark. Then based on that, I started to approach the domain expert, the medical physicist, and then the AI engineers or the AI researchers, and then all like, hey, this is such a cool idea to solve. It is a practical idea. It is important. Then we all gravitate towards what this idea can do, and everything started to accelerate it based on that. So the thing is, you have to have a team, and the team has to be really, really motivated on the problem that you solve. Once you can bring these two together, that's where the ignition happens. And that was a wonderful thing to see. The ambition was just a spark, just a boom.
Can you explain to the listeners about the imaging and then the radiotherapy, the need for the contours and why the contour is done and how it's done traditionally and how things have changed with an AI and what are the benefits, saying that it's done with the slices, CD slices, and then contouring and then building a volumetric 3D model and why it's done. So please explain for the listeners.
So let me start with the very basic of a radiation oncology. The premise is that the tumor cells, the DNA strands are immune to break up with certain level of radiation, which is not lethal for the patient, but the lethal for the tumor cells. Because we are treating a patient with a dangerous radiation, which is generated by a accelerator, like hitting a tungsten with a high voltage, and it emits the photon energy. So the machine is, of course, complex. It's like a spaceship with an arm, and it shoots radiation, and the patient lies in that couch.
So it's shooting from the different directions.
That's right. Yeah. So the machine can rotate around the patient.
Why it's shooting from the different directions?
From a biological response point of view, there are certain level of radiation needs to be concentrated. So when you shoot the radiation from 360-degree angle, so then you're giving a small doses of radiation in on angle, then you concentrate the lethal dose to the tumor site. So that is the reason, like the machine needs to rotate to kind of distribute the radiation as such that the healthy tissues can tolerate certain level of radiation and then hopefully regrow. And when you concentrate the radiation beam to the tumor, then you actually kill almost all of the cancer cells. Actually, almost 60% of all cancer patients receives radiotherapy, and it's a very important modality in terms of treating cancer. Of course, chemo, surgery, and radiation is the most effective way to combine treatment strategy.
So what problems this causes, this 360-degree approach? What are then the consequences?
There is a level of radiation dosage delivered, and the medical team has to make sure that the tumor gets the coverage radiation dose, in the same time minimizing the radiation to the healthy organs to make sure that the patient has a better outcome. For example, if you irradiate the rectum too much, then the patient might have a lifelong issue of a dysfunctional rectum. Same with the bladder. So in the certain regions of the area, you have to be extremely careful how much radiation you give to make sure that it is not lethal to make the healthy tissue unhealthy. So in order to guide the machine, how do we generate the 3D? So the medical physics team came up with an ingenious idea, which to take a CT scan, which is basically a 2D scans in every few millimeter slice. So then you're taking like a picture of a patient volume of, let's say, a 50 centimeter, and then you take a slice of 2D images. When you stitch these 2D images together, it creates a 3D anatomical picture. But then it's just a CT scan, as you know, it's a grayscale type thing. So it's like you can see the bones, bony anatomies clearly, and certain idea of the soft tissue contrast. So based on that, with the anatomical knowledge, typically the radiation oncologist with the support from the therapist would draw or define the volumes of all the organs from that. And this is a very kind of a specialized job. You have to go through the anatomical knowledge and the radiology imaging knowledge to understand what organs and where they are and what is their boundaries. There is a kind of almost like a Photoshop or a CAD software where you can define those to create the 3D volume. And that's what MVision, this AI segmentation software, does basically. So this whole manual processes typically takes hours. I can give an extreme example. So one of our customer in US treats a full body central nervous system cancer patient. So meaning that you have to take a picture of almost the whole body, and then you have to define all the critical organs. And so when the physicist told me that it typically takes us 20 hours of contouring for one patient to manually draw it, with the MVision system, they did it only in 20 minutes. So you can see the scale of the problem, because here the neural net just learns it, applies faster than, not the speed of light, but very, very fast, like in few minutes. So that is what our segmentation software does. It's basically a deep learning based computer vision system. We train with the CT scan and the clinically defined drawings. And then we train the model and then apply, and then it just does. So it's basically automating the whole manual workflow of a clinical decision support system that helps to define the 3D volume more precisely and faster.
Let's jump to the MVision. So when did you found the company, and how did it start?
So we started MVision in late 2017. So we have been like, from the initial idea, I think it was in April or May, my first co-founder, we initially got to that idea, and then we iterated this very fast, like in a few weeks, and then we got our other co-founders, I believe in almost in a month. And after that, we started to pitch, and then we secured the funding in Q4 of 2017. So that's how we started.
So how many founders did you have, and how much do you have currently?
We started with 5 founders. So my initial idea was that I'll take care of the sales and marketing. We have a domain expert, medical physicist, one software engineer, or looking after all the infra and software, and then 2 deep learning or AI engineers. So that was the initial idea and composition. And so we were 5, and then 5 of us, we got together and started the company. But unfortunately, 2 of the founders left, one in very early stage and one after a few years. So we are now 3 founders remaining.
Tell us about the first product launch.
It's very fond memory. So initially, when we started, we were able to start the data collaboration, because it's the first time we are kind of doing like, and the hospitals are asking like, hey, what can you give us? Can you give us lifetime free license and all these sort of things? Then we found some customers who were kind of like, okay, we can give you some data in exchange for certain free premium time. So we secured the data, and then we trained the model, and then within 11 months, so we started the operation in January 2018. And in 11 months, we were able to get our CE approval for our first model, which was for the prostate cancer.
So how was it? How well it performed?
It was underwhelming, I have to say. There are a few reasons for that.
So total shit. Total shit.
Yeah, you can say that. So yeah, initially it was targeted for early stage prostate cancers. So typically you have to define 6 or 7 volumes, including the prostate itself, rectum and bladder, and some level of the lymph nodes. When we developed the model, when we showed, then most of us like, yeah, it's okay, it's amazing, but then it was not overwhelming because some of would say, because we didn't do like a lot of post-processing and stuff like that, so the initial model was like zigzaggy, and there's like the clinicians like hey, I see maybe, but I don't trust it because why is it not smooth? Why is it behaving like this? So we thought like, wow, okay, so that means how the user perceives or how they understand, it's different than how the model is understanding that. So do we have a problem with data? Do we have a problem of heuristics? What is it? And why are we failing? Why are not super excited? So in some sense, it was a very sobering moment to identify that basically what you thought in paper, like you take clinical data, you train an AI, you deploy it in the cloud, we integrate, everybody's happy. Actually, our first users were not that happy or excited, or like, okay, it saves me some time, but I have to fix it all the time. What is the point of an AI if I have to fix it? Then we asked the question like, okay, what do you really have to fix? Why you have to fix it? Then we came to the learning basically that this is a known problem in the radiation oncology in terms of like when you define certain volume, how do you know or communicate with each other like, hey, this is the way I draw the prostate. How you draw the prostate as a clinician is different from the other doctor who does the prostate. Then we came to know there are like...
So in prostate, 2 clinicians
drawing slightly differently.
Okay.
Slightly differently because of their training or understanding or not accepting a common rule how to define certain volume. Then we discovered that this is a known problem in the industry, and very prominent hospitals or the clinicians actually started to write guidelines. So there are like almost like 20 or 24, like a lot of guidelines. Then it kind of hit at us like, Eureka, hey, okay, we can make a model that follows the guideline. And maybe that's the way to do. Then some customers say like, oh yeah, we try to follow, we don't follow, or it's too complex to follow the guideline because the guideline is in a paper. It sort of says that, okay, the process is defined by this when you see the L5 and those are the heuristics. It is very difficult to implement that in a system. But if you train an AI to follow the guideline, then I think we might have solved the problem. So that was our like a second comeback thought process, that we're going to make this model compliant to a guideline, and we'll make sure the users say that, yes, it follows the guideline precisely. And then we took a very difficult challenge, immediately sort of started to regret it, because when you take the clinical data, because the users do not have any consensus, meaning you have an ambition to follow the guideline, but nobody follows the guideline. How do you solve it? Then, so that, okay, we have to create this data set ourselves. How do we do it? By chance or with my connection, I found a large group of resident oncologists, and also my co-founder found the medical students group in Helsinki, and then we joined force, and then we had an intense summer in the 2020 summer. I think we were intensely trying out this new idea that we generate the data set, then we train the model and see if our users, so that was our thought process. And then maybe it will fail. And I think we are probably sure that it will probably fail, but we have to try. And once we release the product, it immediately like a boom. Because of course we had to create a certain range of data set, which was thanks to our AI team, that they were able to optimize it around the limited set of data set. And that was not well understood, because the typical understanding that time was that you need 10,000 sample, you need 20,000 sample. One of our competitors was saying that we have 25,000 sample in our training data set. And we had like hundreds, but well-curated data set. When we discovered that is just you just discovered a secret that nobody knows, because we countered that with like, you don't need 20,000 samples, you need maybe 200 samples, and you need well-defined, followed by certain protocol or a guideline, and not like, just your own. So these two things, when it came together, when we showcased in the demonstration, almost everywhere the clinician's jaw was dropping, almost like, wow, how the hell this can be so precise, exactly like the way we want, exactly like the way we do. Oh, it's actually better than. So we were able to gain trust. And then when we sort of said that, when most of the users would argue with us, like, oh, no, it's my style. When we said that, hey, here's the guideline, this is what you should follow according to your, the European society or the US society. And that sort of convinced our users, like, yes, this is the way to standardize. This is the way to also implement a common standard.
So let's go. What ups and downs did you have on your journey? Let's start from the downs.
Well, in one point, I remember the company's cash balance came down to 3,800 euro. And we were like 5 people payroll to meet end of the month. It was super stressful moment. So it was almost like, I don't know, maybe a few weeks from bankruptcy. That was an extremely difficult challenge. We lost one of our early developer. He passed away suddenly. And he was one of our top performing engineers as well. So very difficult challenge we faced. I personally had a few stressful moments, and not sleeping, things like that. And also challenges, the initial sales scaling and not having experience in sales. How to scale that was a super stressful moment. Learning to do the fundraising and challenges on that as well. All the challenges you can imagine, I think we had it in MVision. So there's a saying that to be successful, you need to go through all the shit. And I think we have been through all of those.
How about you said finding the balance with the founders? Tell us about that.
Yeah, it is probably, there is almost a good saying that you start a company with somebody that you know about 10 years, 20 years. It actually, there is a truth in it, because at least when we started that time, I was determined to kind of build a company and making it successful. And of course, a few other co-founders, but unfortunately not all of us. And so then I pretty much immediately found out who is a entrepreneur and an entrepreneur. The entrepreneurs remained, and the entrepreneurs did not last, because, or maybe I'm thinking into one-dimensional way, but nonetheless, typically that you have a mission, and then you have to really believe in it and immerse in it. When that balance is struck, then it's that took us some time to iterate through to come to the current composition. So that happens when you do not know the founders long term or haven't worked well. So that balance had to be found in a very difficult manner, or just iterative manner. So we just went through the iteration process.
How about the technological difficulties?
Yeah, so as I'm mentioning, the deep learning models are basically, you have a idea, an experiment, you can get a good enough model with basically anybody can build a deep learning model with certain data, but then it is the output, the false positive or the false negative. How do you control that? refining that process is a hugely technological leap in terms of finding the balance between how you tune your units, how do you identify the hyperparameter, and and most importantly, how do you know the quality of the data is a consensus and high quality data. So when you combine these three things, then you can create a model. Then once you create the model, then how do you integrate in a complex environment like in hospital? So identifying that. On top of that, we are a cloud-first company, meaning most of this imaging data is getting processed in the large vendors like Amazon or AWS. And how do you create a legal and a technical and a cybersecurity compliant framework so that the hospital administration is okay to follow that? So identifying that was also a technical, legal, and also a technical challenge. So we had to go through all this to bring this cloud-first, AI-first solution for radiation oncology.
How about ups then?
Oh yeah, there are quite a few of those. I remember the first customer, the first scan, the first prostate cancer patient. It was almost like a competition between two centers in Finland. They were like, hey, we want to be the first. No, we want to be the first. And without our knowledge, the other center went first. And it's like, hey, we did our first patient.
With your software? With
our software, yes. Yeah. So the first prostate cancer patient, when I clearly remember, it was 24th of January 2019, I believe. That event occurred, and so that was almost a competition with two centers, and that was wonderful things that I will remember. Then the first outside Finnish customer, so there was an inbound customer from Germany. So that was the first time we saw like this product has value outside of that. And after that, we went to the trade shows. From there, we got the early traction in United Kingdom. Right now, we have a large customer base in UK, and that is a big achievement. And also signing up the research and development agreement with National Cancer Center Singapore. Actually, I ran the whole project remotely. I never visited Singapore to sign the contract. I only visited a few years after, so which was a very interesting fact. Like when you are driven, it seems like really impossible. Like why a prominent center like National Cancer Center Singapore would sign an agreement with a Finnish startup company. It was just our persistence and our vision and our mission what resonated, and they were able, so that was quite a high point for us.
When did you have with your team an aha moment and you understood that you have something special on your hands as a product wise?
I will never forget. So during the pandemic, we have been trying to get Helsinki University Hospital for some time, probably close to 3 years, maybe 2 to 3 years. Helsinki University Hospital known for very practical, pragmatic, and they also appreciate high quality product. So during the pandemic time, when I routinely reached out, then just said, can you send me the trial agreement? I sent the trial agreement on Friday. By Saturday morning, it was signed. And by next week, we had to deploy the system. Later on, I actually realized that during the pandemic process, like any hospitals, Helsinki University Hospital also went through a very severe shortages of staff and resources. And every time we go and sort of say, how is it going? They say like, it's the highest quality product. This is good. This is there's a saying like no news is good news. So meaning the product is operating. That is what really struck us like, wow, that this is probably very essential for a center like Helsinki University Hospital, where they're treating over 6,000 patients per year. So that was a clear aha moment, like, wow, this has an impact. Yeah, so that was very memorable.
Okay, let's imagine that I start to build a medical software, which I have not yet started, but maybe in the next life. Tell me how the medical software is being produced and shipped to the clients?
Definition of the problem and the pain point. I have to tell you, the whole medical system, it is extremely complex. Maybe it is more complex than building a rocket. I would dare to say that. Because it is people, it is process, it is workflow, it's pathway, it is generalization of a general physicians to a specialized, how the general physician communicate with the disease information to the specialization. Does a specialized doctor has enough information or needs to discuss this in a group, or what are the other, then you have pathology, you have radiology, you have other biomarkers that you have to identify. So when I try to identify the pain point could be very one directional, and maybe the pain point in a certain way it probably has a value for that particular department, but then it's not identified as a value for the overall hospital system. So sometimes identifying the pain point to a scalable a sales model, or like a value and the price and who's going to pay for it. That is the most challenging part. So you really have to be an expert. You really have to have a diehard clinician champion who can give you all this information, then define the problem well, and then tell where the problem sits in terms of the commercializations to happen. So you can be ending up a problem, but no business case. And that's one of the biggest challenge of starting a medical startup, I think.
How did you develop that competency as a team?
At least for MVision, the segmentation software or the radiation oncology, I have been fortunate because I had an industry knowledge for 4 years. So I knew the market size roughly, and then the problem, and then who would buy the product, or certain understanding of the commercialization and the pain point. So then we were able to connect the pain point to a business model and then combine them together. And so we were just very lucky that because I had a deep domain understanding already prior starting MVision.
And your founders supported that process?
Yes, of course. So it was bringing all the information in, but I was in charge of the full commercialization from the beginning. My idea was always to see that, okay, we do understand the pain well, then how can we commercialization? So we had a benefit of understanding the pain to a business model well. Typically, I see a lot of founders or startups trying to kind of say like, hey, I have this solution in this path flow and things like that. Then we say, okay, I understand the pain. What is the business model? Can you fit in the business model into this, identifying the pain and the business model? That's where I see a lot of disconnect.
How about the regulatory environment?
The regulatory roadmap, meaning that typically you have to have a CE mark or FDA or MDSAP certification. So you have to have a quality management system. The whole thing is very complex, but in order to sell the product, you cannot sell a product without the regulatory clearance, and it can go to level 1 to level 3. So it is very, very complex. If you don't know how to navigate this, there are a lot of consulting companies that just suck all the money out of you. So you have to basically understand the basic premises of the quality systems and the intended use, and based on the intended use, what sort of classification. So you have to have a overall understanding that. So it is like almost being a lawyer. So you have to know it well before you kind of launch any kind of product or commercialization. Just study well, study the intended use and the quality management system, technical documentation. So it's a huge barrier, and recently it is becoming even more expensive because of the European Union transitioning to MDR. And I have heard that many startup companies from the US are afraid to come to EU because of the MDR burden, and the cost has probably already 5x from before.
Did I understood that if I'm building a medical software, I need to understand the pain point and how does this relate to different people, roles in the hospital, specialities, processes, workflows, and pathways, and understand that does this problem pose a problem to overall network of those previously mentioned concepts, and then I need to match that with the business case and a business model, and after that I start to build the product, and then the clinical validation. What does it mean, clinical validation?
Clinical validation meaning that your users, the clinician, has to be raving about it. It cannot be like, oh, I like the product. It has to be, wow, this is going to change this is going to change that, because the value has to be like 10x. Anything innovative and new, it's kind of changing the behavior, and changing the behavior does not happen if it is not 10x. If somebody does not perceive, like if it is super important, that it will not happen. So for example, the segmentation software, 20 hours of contouring reduced by 20 minutes. The scale factor is just on a different level. All right, so identifying that pain point is where the challenge is. For example, I think I can tell you a particular domain. The robotic surgery platforms are not getting enough traction. It will be the future, but right now it is a very difficult transition period. Whether these robots are precise enough. Does the robot surgery systems create more complications, or it improves the complications, or is it the operator, or the robot needs an AI software? So you can see that the surgeons are not just going to give away like, okay, the robot come in and do all this sort of stuff, because it is an intricately difficult challenge, right? So we are sort of seeing that the robots are coming, but not fast enough or challenging enough because of the perception. We know the pain point, but then it's the clinicians are going to be raving about like, I love my robot doing the surgery for me, right? So we are probably not there yet. So that's what it means basically, that your clinician has to be kind of raving about it, like, hey, this is the future. And if you don't have that, that means you don't have the clinical validation point. So once you have the clinical validation, when your customers are raving about it, or they're excited about the project, whether it will save them time, or it will increase the patient outcome, or it will save them money, they will not be interested. Once the validation is done, then the regulatory process, because you have to, the whole regulatory regime is to kind of make sure that you have a certain level of traceability of your design to the output and the intended use. And then you have a coherent process of like capturing any kind of a adverse event and things like that. So once you have that, then you are ready to go to sell the product and go to market strategy.
When did you start to go abroad, and how things evolved after that?
Yeah, so once we had the CE clearance, then we, in I think after 2 or 3 months, so we had our first European trade show. So we just went there as a startup, showed up, and I already started to build some of the network in terms of key opinion leaders, distributors, or the industry facilitators. And so in the trade show, I made more network. So we signed up our initial distributors in most of the European regions, and then started to work with them. And also the KOL sites, we are also started to build that relationship, sort of giving them free licenses to validate the product, showcase, write about MVision. So that's so pretty much almost immediately we started the go-to-market process, targeting a distribution partnership for Europe, and in the same time attracting the key opinion leaders to able to give us some clinical validation and testimonials.
What do you think about positioning?
Absolutely important. The positioning is basically you tell a story to your customer that why your product is important in their life or in their area. So the positioning helps to segment the level of customer that you have, then you can really, really focus on, and then refine the product in terms of what is the positioning is telling and what is the customer, is there a mismatch or not. Once that is identified, then it becomes a repeatable customer acquisition process. Without that, there is an approach of like I even heard like this kind of like we're gonna world dominate and things like that. So it's in paper very nice, like, okay, we have a cloud-based system, we're gonna give everybody this, but that's the wrong strategy, because when you also have a large customer base, servicing them also become a big problem. In the medical world, taking care of your customer is your key responsibility. Post-sales activity is really, really important. If your positioning is not defined well, meaning your customer segment is not well identified, if you haven't identified the customer, then you're not able to serve them. If you're not able to serve your customer well, you become irrelevant. So that's why positioning is the master key to success.
Lastly, what would you say to a 18-year-old girl or a boy who wants to be an entrepreneur? What would be your advice?
You have to make sure whether you really want to be an entrepreneur. And I have seen it so many times that there are entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs. Just get started. Throughout the process, first you have to understand, is that really what you want? So entrepreneurship is not for the faint-hearted people. It is not for the people like, okay, I have my 9 to 5, I go for my basketball lessons, now I go for my guitar lessons. Not that. It is a lifestyle. It is a almost like a missionary. So you have to ask these kind of hard questions, whether it is the right thing for you or not. And by experimenting, you will discover, and then you will know when you give up the idea that you need to fit in, or you have to be in a 9 to 5, or you need to be a corporation, you will pretty much find out that whether you are an entrepreneur or not. So discover that first. And then after that, identify a likely-minded people or a team or a problem, and then try to identify the problem and the team and what the solution can be for the world. Because the world does not need another Twitter or a Facebook. The world probably needs another rocket engine or a space systems or bullet trains or robotic transportation system or miniaturize nuclear power plant. Go after the hardest problems. If I'm 18 years old myself, and if I believe I'm an entrepreneur, I would go to the most craziest, hardest, difficult problem, which has a huge impact for the humanity. I'll go after that, and I'll follow my passion to the end.
Thank you, Mahmoudul. Thank you for visiting us.
Thank you very much.